Hi, I'm Sheila Layton. Welcome to the Beyond Coincidence Show, where every moment holds a miracle and we talk about seeing the hand of God in our lives. Call it a God wink or a tender mercy or whatever you want. Everyone on this show has seen the hand of God or their higher power in their lives in a very real and personal way.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Beyond Coincidence podcast. You are going to be so happy that you tuned in today because I have a really amazing guest with me today. Her name is Lisa Valentine Clark. She is one accomplished lady. She is an actress, a screenwriter, a comedian, an author, a freelance writer. She hosted the feel-good show Random Acts, and she has her own podcast called The Lisa Show on BYU Radio. She and her late husband, Christopher, are the parents of 5 children. That in itself is a big deal and a big accomplishment, by the way. So I feel super honored to have her as my guest today. But even though her life seems so perfect and wonderful, it has not been without challenges and loss and grief. So without further ado, Miss Lisa Valentine Clark. So Lisa, just tell us a little bit about Lisa's life today in 2024.
Today in 2024, I host the Lisa Show podcast, and with some amazing people I get to work with. I love it. And so I love being able to create. I have 5 kids, one at home who's in high school, and the rest are baby adults at various stages. I'm getting ready for my first wedding of my second coming up. And so that's a new experience, and welcoming new people into my family is really exciting to me. So I'm really excited to get a new daughter-in-law. And and I just am discovering just sort of what it's like sort of on the other side of raising a bunch of kids and having a little bit more discretionary time. And so I like to fill it by hanging out with really funny, good friends that I have. And that's what it looks like. I am the children's song leader in my local congregation, which I love. And what else do? I do some improvisation with friends. I've got a lot of hobbies and things that I'm doing. I'm just kind of in a new phase of life. That's what it kind of looks like for me now.
So great that you have expanded your horizons and not feeling super, you still miss the kids, but you're not feeling lonely and unneeded.
Listen, it is what it is. Your kids always need you. I always need them. That's the nature of the relationship.
They go and
it's
come
just
back.
Changed a little bit, right? Like it's just it's not the day-to-day as much and the immediate needs, but it's just like I always think it's just such a privilege to be able to be in our adult kids' lives, because it's not a given. They don't have to, and I just enjoy them so much. So they're just really great. The older they get, the more they become themselves, and I've really enjoyed that. They're these funny, smart, thoughtful, kind humans, and anyway, they're great.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And they go and then they come back with more people.
It's great, which is great.
So you just don't downsize when your kids leave, because we actually upsized because we're like, we don't have space for all the people.
Oh, sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
Although it's so funny that, that my husband and I actually talked about it. We're like, if our kids and grandkids ever need to live with us, we'll just offer to pay their rent.
Yeah,
we've already talked about it.
That's a different conversation, right?
That's a totally different conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting off topic. Okay, Lisa, tell me about what it was like growing up for you, your family life. Did religion play a part? If so, what was that like?
Yeah, I was raised in a religious home. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My parents were. I come from many different family lines from Sweden and Denmark who were seeking religious freedom and seeking to be with the early saints, and came over. So there are a lot of family stories that I have of the lengths that they went to be able to do that. And I grew up with a deep love and respect for God and for the benefit of a spiritual, formal religion and practicing that and the benefits of it. And I reaped the benefits of it. I was raised in Lincoln, Nebraska, which I just think is the best place to grow up. Nice Midwest, clean air, good school system, all the things.
Yes,
And
actually, my son and daughter-in-law served in Nebraska, served their
oh,
missions in Nebraska.
yeah, I love that place. And I love the people and the church and the ward that I grew up in. And I'm still very close with a lot of those people today. Great mom and dad. Shout out to Robert and Sheila Valentine and my siblings. I'm also one of 5 kids, and we grew up doing, early morning seminary and going to youth classes and going to church every Sunday. And it was a big part of my upbringing. And I had a really good experience with it. I never felt like I was coerced or forced, although it was a big, strong family culture. And I'm glad for that. I'm glad that I, at a young age, was really familiar with how to pray and and the importance of reading scriptures and thinking about a spiritual life, and in a way that just as incorporates with all the other areas of your life.
Would you say that your relationship with God was sort of a line upon line situation, or did you have kind of an aha moment at some point in your teen years or early young adult years where
Yeah, definitely. I was definitely an earnest kid, and I like to say that I had my first existential crisis at 12, where I really realized I am just a speck of dust on a speck of dust in this vast expanding universe. Like, what does that mean? I was kind of a deep kid like that. And I remember really thinking about that and wondering, well, then why does anything that I do or think matter in the great scheme of the universe? And around that time too, about 12, going into junior high and making decisions, actually being one of the only members of my particular faith, I remember thinking, this is going to make me weird. This is going to make me different, because it just is. Just a lot of people, Nebraska just aren't, LDS. And so I thought, does this matter to me or not? Or should it, or will it? And I spent that summer praying about that, of to know God and to know if the kinds of things that I was choosing, the kind of decisions that I was making even mattered to an all-knowing, all-powerful being. And I had a very sweet relationship with God, where I felt like my prayers were heard, and I felt like it was answered in a way that was foundational for how I moved forward. And I just thought, yeah, I believe this, and I choose to believe that what I do and is important because it's important to God. And I think I just I've certainly gone through different phases and different situations in my life where my faith has been tested, or where doubt has overshadowed a lot of my faith. And some people call it a faith crisis. I call it just the process of conversion, and conversion especially to Christ. And so I've felt a lot of uncomfortable moments from that, but I've always kept that sort of 12-year-old belief of no, but you know what? When you pray, God hears you, and you're important to God. And so I think that has been absolutely just
foundational
in my life. Absolutely foundational.
I mean, that's really cool, Lisa, that at 12 years old, you could take those feelings and pray about them and actually have something that would be a foundation for your whole life. But don't you think too, though, that in those moments of doubt and fear or whatever, that if we turn to God, those two are super growing. I mean, that's when we test our faith. That's when we prove God, right? Is we're like, hey, God, I'm struggling. Do you love me? Do you even know who I am?
Being reminded of that and our place in the universe, I think, has such significance, because I do think that a lot of times God is quiet. Some people speak with such boldness about how God talks to them and how frequently. And I've always been kind of, I don't know, suspicious of that, I think, because I think it's so easy. I think so many people just speak for God. And I'm very, just in my own experience, because of my own experience, I'm hesitant to do that because I feel like it's such a serious thing and such a personal thing of like
Yes.
how God speaks to us.
And I think that's
And
something that
interpreting it, I think, has
yes,
a great responsibility.
I
Yeah.
agree. And that is something that I want to try to pull out with this podcast is what does that look like for you individually? Because it's so different for every single person. And like you say, God speaking boldly. And in fact, I had a conversation with my son the other day and we were talking and I said, honey, I can honestly tell you that I have never in my life knelt down and said a prayer and had got an answer. Never. And I'm 60 years old. And I've been faithful my whole life, but that's just not how it works for me, and I just said to him, when you're seeking for answers, just pay attention to your life. Who comes in and out of your life? What thoughts you have, what music, what YouTube, what, TikTok, like God will speak to you in any avenue that you will listen and be still enough to hear, and so I agree with you. Like when people are like, oh, boldly, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's not my experience, but I suppose it can be for other people. For you, I mean, before we get into your personal experience, in general, how would you say God or the Spirit speak to Lisa?
I think it's been different things at different times, and I think, I just read a great book about a year and a half ago called Divine Quietness by the wonderful author, and she talks about those periods of time where we feel that quietness and maybe we don't feel God's presence so strongly or the answers in the way. And it's made me reconsider this sort of expectations that I put on God of, if I do this, then you should show up this way. And if I, so the way that God speaks to me is I think through everything in my life, I think we find what we're looking for, and I think, and our intention. And I do feel like for me, the Spirit works in my mind and in my heart. And I think that God meets us where we are. And I think that just as important as it is to hear God's, like our personal revelation, right? Like how God speaks to us, I also feel like equally important is for us to choose to listen and also choose to act on the information that we already have until we get an answer. So for me, I think a lot of power has come in by just choosing it and by doing the things that I feel like will bring me closer to God, even if I don't feel like it, even if I feel like it doesn't work through periods of time, and not being so anxious about that, like a timeline and a thing. I've learned over the years, it's different, that God can answer your prayers with a yes, with waiting, and with a no. And sometimes our expectations, at least sometimes my expectations, can get in the way when I think, well, no, this is a good thing. This is a righteous thing, so I should get it. Or the answer should be yes or that. And sometimes, our expectations can get in the way of us learning a different truth or becoming closer to God and having that sort of communion with him as well. So yeah, it's been different things. And I think that I have learned a lot through study and by patience, and also by just experimenting on it. Like, what if I lived this way? Then what would happen? What if I acted as if this were important to God? What if I acted as if this were the right thing to do? How would that happen? And so sometimes I think it's an experiment, and I think a lot of times for me, I get the confirmation or the gratitude after I've done the thing, which is taking a leap of faith or a step of faith, or just pointing it in the right direction, and maybe not even feeling a clear direction. And so I think for me, a lot of that has been. That's why I talk a lot about improvisation, where you just make the next choice. You just choose and move forward instead of standing still. And
because faith is an action word, right? Like we've learned that the different apostles have talked about that, right? Like one foot in front of the other. You don't actually know. Step into the darkness. Have faith to step into the darkness, right? And that's scary. But you have to, once you have that foundation like you got when you were 12, it's like, okay, God knows me and he loves me. Okay, if he loves me, I'm just going to take this step. And if it's not right, he'll stop me. Right? Or I'll keep marching down the path and it will work out. Like
and I do think that God does. Well, I actually don't think God stops us. I think we make our own, decisions and mistakes, and we can learn from them and guide and be guided from them. But I do feel that, like, listening to the sort of the warnings or the ideas that we get in our head when we are thinking clearly, when we are, doing the things that we need to do, because obviously, like, depression and anxiety can intrusive thoughts can interfere. So then it becomes even more, I think, important to go back to the foundational things that are just not like crazy and out of the box, but that are so often overlooked, like being still and meditating and spending time with God, quieting your voice, spending time in nature, praying, taking the sacrament, going to the temple, reading our scriptures. Things like that are all, I think, ways for us to be able to get back to a way where we can hear all the things that are going on, and the messages that are important for us to receive.
Yeah, I agree, because our world is so loud and so busy that taking those moments to be still, like you said, and honestly for me, that, because I'm busy and I'm always going whatever, but honestly, thoughts come to me when I'm walking or if I'm in the shower, because nobody's bugging me, nobody's talking to me, in those moments of stillness is when those thoughts can. And actually, years ago, I sort of set a goal. I was the young women's president of our youth group of our church, and I didn't feel that I could do this. I decided I'm not going to have the radio on in the car. And all my kids were still home now, so we spent a lot of time in the car. And I just didn't have anything playing at that time. And it was amazing to me how many thoughts just came into my mind of things we should talk about, things we should do. And it was a really fascinating experience and experiment for me.
So cool.
So I think you're right. Those moments of stillness are so important. I know that you have an experience that you've been pondering that you would like to share with us. So I'll just let you dive in, give some background so that we can sort of see where God's hand was in the details, and I'll just let you go for it.
About a time that I felt God's hand in my life?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking?
Where it was, very distinctly for you, Lisa, in your life, you knew that he knew you and where you were.
Yeah, I think one of the most dramatic experiences that I think I've had that actually just seems so, simple now when I retell it, is during the pandemic. It was a very intense time for everyone. For my family in particular, my husband was actively dying. He was on hospice for ALS, a terminal disease that he'd been living with for about 4.5 years. All of 5 of our children were at home. And it was a very intense time for our family. Because we had a lot of therapists and things that were helping us in home and hospice. And then because of the pandemic, they weren't allowed inside our home. And it was just me and the kids and Christopher. And it was a really hard time. And it felt so overwhelming after taking care of him for, it was 4.5 years. I was really tired. It was very, intense. I was still working full time, going into work. It just didn't seem like there were enough hours in the day, and that everybody needed me, because everybody did. And it was very intense. And I remember thinking, in a case like this, and the way that I'd been taught, the way that I am, study it out in your own mind, right? Come up with a solution and go to the Lord with it, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember at this time thinking, there is no solution. I can't think of I have been praying for help and relief, and now all my help in the form of hospice nurses and doctors and therapists has been taken away. So that's not the answer.
Right. Oh.
But like my heart is breaking. My kids are sad and depressed, and rightfully so. My husband is dying. I can't even talk about that. I can't even think about that. I mean, I was at the time. And it just seemed ridiculous, and it just didn't seem like there was any answer. And I remember kneeling down by my bed and just offering just the most pathetic prayer where all I couldn't even say anything. And I just had a really neat experience where I felt just loved. I wasn't asking to feel love. I was asking for some specific help, mainly like physical help, and maybe some emotional relief. It was so overwhelming, and what I felt was just love. And and it reminded me of the experience I had as a little girl, right? Where I'm like, well, what am I going to do about this when I go to junior high? And I'm just all like in turmoil and saying, and like, I'm a speck on a speck in the universe, and what does it all mean? And this seems ridiculous, and how can my life have any meaning? And that existential cry. It was like the same sort of thing of like the same kind of like feeling of I don't understand anything. And it's interesting to me that the answer was just that I felt loved. I felt seen and known in a way that gave me strength to know that this wasn't an accident. This wasn't mean. This wasn't intentionally cruel. Just in a way that was, that I was seen by the creator of the universe, and that I felt loved. And that
what did that feel like? That feeling, like a physical feeling?
It felt for me that I was known. It just that knowledge, and then just like when you feel like you've really, I couldn't even get the words out, but I just felt, I know, and I'm with you in it, and I'm here with you in this. And that honestly was such a turning point, because it wasn't something that I expected. It wasn't even something that I thought I was asking for. It was so different that it felt so personal and known that for whatever reason, it made me feel like, okay, I can do this. Even though I still had no answers about how I was going to do it. I just felt like it's okay with this because I'm not alone in it. And so I'll need to know I'll know what I'll need to know as it goes forward, or I won't, but it will be okay. Yeah. Like it wasn't conditional on a certain outcome. And I think it did give me a confidence in I knew that was a sacred time, that was something that I never imagined myself being in a position, and certainly felt overwhelming. And I always think back to that experience, because it has now given me the confidence that I think of, like, no matter what happens, like, nothing matters, right? But that no matter what happens, like when I was my most desperate and my most just out of control, God was with me. God will never leave us. And so that's huge. So now I feel like I have more of that confidence of like, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't even know what's going on right now. But I do know that God is good, and that He never leaves us, especially in our hardest moments. And I think that's huge.
That's huge, to know that you're not alone, and that you're loved, and that you matter. I mean, everyone wants that feeling, right? I don't care who you are.
Everyone can have that feeling too. It's so funny to feel like it was such a special experience, and yet it's such a universal human experience. And I don't doubt for a minute if anyone else prayed to know if they were important to God or if they were loved, that they would have a similar experience. And even though I think billions of people can still have that experience, it still feels really personal to me. And I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing.
That you, the one, do matter.
Yeah.
that you could have that very personal experience. And I think the cool part of that too, Lisa, is that you said you didn't even know what you needed. You just wanted the help that had left because of the pandemic. And the Lord was like, okay, but Lisa, I'm with you and I love you. I've got your back. And you didn't even know you needed that. Right? That's, I feel like that's how you know it was God, because those were not your thoughts. This was not
again, I
something.
think sometimes we have the expectation of how God will speak to us. We have the expectation of who God is, and instead of kind of discovering who God is.
And don't you
We are
find
limited by our own perspectives and by our own phraseology, by our own language, but we really are separated from God in many ways. And so now I would like to commune with God. I would like to be where God is, to learn more about God instead of giving a list of dictating who I think he should be.
Yeah, no,
What
I
I
love
think he should say.
Yeah, I love that. Like, don't set expectations on God, because a couple of things I feel like can happen. You set an expectation, and sometimes it actually works. Like, you actually ask for something and you get it. Very rarely, but sometimes. But I just feel like we set these expectations, and when they're not met in the way we want them to be met, we're disappointed. So now God either doesn't exist or he doesn't love us, or whatever. And we tend to limit God. I feel like if you set a certain expectation, you're setting limitations on what he can do, and then you're not paying attention enough to understand what he's given you. But you, being so vulnerable at that time, you're like, I don't know what I need something. And he sent you exactly what you needed. And what you will need now going forward, raising your family. Like, that's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Have you written that experience down somewhere? Like,
I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of journaling.
That's true, because you're a writer and a journaler. So good for you. Good for you. Because, I probably maybe 5 years ago started doing that. And I don't like writing because I'm left-handed and just all the things. I
do
just don't
voice
like
dictation, and
that's what I do. I literally have a note in my phone because my grandma lived to be almost 103, and she kept a spiritual journal, and it was really cool to read it after she passed away. And I was like, oh, I'd love to do that. So I went to this market and bought this really cool leather-bound, homemade page journal thingy because I wanted it to be set apart. I dictate these experiences into my phone, email them to myself, print them out, and stick them in the book.
Good for you. That's awesome.
I mean, I do handwrite some of them because I feel like there's value in that too, in seeing handwriting, of your grandma or great grandma or whatever. But I just think, we think that we're going to remember these experiences because they were so profound, but we don't. Either we remember a teeny bit and we miss all those details that make them super special, or we just don't even remember that they happened until we're like, oh, I think I had an experience, but I don't remember it. I'm trying to be way better now. I just have an experience, talking into my phone. Some are pretty profound, and some are really not a big deal, but they are to me. And so good for you to write those down, because I think I just think, and I don't know if you've gone back and read, you probably have, some of those experiences, especially in that really tough time. It brings you right back. Have you done that?
Revisited some traumatic events, yes.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, the ones where God, yeah. But like the ones where the Lord really was there, because I feel like when you read them, it takes you back, but you feel those same feelings. Like you feel that love that he has for you. And I think that's really valuable, especially in times of trial that come forward or hard days. You're like, God, really? Do you love me? And then you read that experience and you're like, yeah, he does. I know he does, because I felt him. And then you feel that again. So I just think there's just so much value in that. Is there anything else that you would like to share about having God in your life?
Well, I just think that it's a choice, right? It's something that is so fundamental to just how I operate in the world. And it has it changed over my life as well. And it's been such a value. And I can see that looking back, especially. And it's something that I really want for, my kids and my family and my friends. And I think it's such a thing that as much as you can, want and point that having a relationship with God is fundamental to how I show up in the world. And so of course everybody else would think it was important too. And everyone has their own, timeline on it, and also opinions and experiences of whether they think that that's valuable or not. And I hope that I can be. I think my hope is to share examples and of the value in having a relationship with God, and the sweetness of it, the importance of it, the impact of it, is really important to me. And yet I recognize and see how it is probably one of the most deeply personal things that anyone else can express. And it's not something even that it's easy to find all the words for, let alone be able to, uh, sort of convince other people in a way other than just like living your life, I think. And so there's been a learning curve in that, I think, and how I've been able to show up and being able to like share experiences that I've had and truths that I've come to know in a way that is respectful and that is inviting and not excludes anyone.
Yeah,
Because
I love that.
I think that's really important.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of sort of answered that final question of why do you think it's important to recognize the hand of God in your life?
Yeah, I
Um,
think and if I kept it to myself and I never shared that it would be disingenuous, and that I think that it would be unfair, um, and I think it would be not just ungrateful, but it also wouldn't really be the whole truth, of just of the reality of the situation, the reality that God's hand has been throughout my whole life. And I could go from when I was little to all the way to now and just say, I was led to go here, or I thought this would be a good idea and this was magnified, or I tried really hard and I made a mistake and then something happened that I feel is God's hand that made it okay, or helped me recover, or it wasn't okay but I wasn't alone in it, right? and
right.
and even the way that I talk about that, I mean, I want to acknowledge God's hand in all things, and I think when I don't, it's just not me being authentic or real, and I just I can't take credit for my life, especially when I've asked God to guide it and I've tried to follow him my whole life. So I do feel really important, like it's important to acknowledge God's hand. And I try to do that in a way that, again, that's respectful and it's not just too casual, right? Like just saying, well,
Right.
God told me this and then God told me that, like as if it were just a regular relationship, or that it was, common, because I do think that one of the themes in my life has been God trusts me, and God trusts me to find out and part of my devotion and faith to him is aligning my will to his will, which requires me to be honest about who I am and what I want. Because if I'm not honest about it, then I can't fully give my will. You can't fake that. And so it's deeply, it requires a humility that is uncomfortable, I think sometimes, and has been, and a meekness of acknowledging all the things that I don't know, because the more that I learn about God, the more that I try to recognize, I mean, his hand is in everything. He's a
Right.
perfect anonymous giver, and I feel like he gives us so many blessings constantly, many of which that we won't even see or realize in this life. And I really believe that. And so to point it out or to acknowledge God's hand is is almost a commitment and a choice to live a certain way as well. And I take that really seriously, and I know a lot of people don't. um, and uh, and so it's hard to sort of open up yourself to that kind of criticism, but at the same time, it would be disingenuous not just to assume that you just did everything yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. And I love that, that, um, that he's and what did you call him, an anonymous giver? I love that.
But I think, there's so many things and ways that we're being helped that we can't acknowledge and or that we don't see, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Exactly. Do you find though, as you sort of getting a little bit older and a little bit more confidence, it's a little bit easier. I know when you're younger, it's a little bit harder to put your faith out there because you are going to get slammed. People are going to make fun of you, whatever, and I just feel like I've come to the point in my life where I'm like, this is who I am. Take me or leave me, like me or don't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to apologize because I believe in a loving heavenly parents and a savior who love me and are with me and guide me. I'm not going to apologize for that because that is who I am, right? That's authentically who I am. And I am who I am today because of that belief. Mm-hmm. I just appreciate your openness and your honesty because it's beautiful.
Well, that's so nice of you to say. I have been the beneficiary of so many people who have had different life experiences than me, who think differently than me, being vulnerable enough to share what they really think, even if they know, and it's maybe especially when they know that I don't have the same beliefs. And it has strengthened my connections to people, and it's helped me to love more and to love more deeply, and keeping that kind of open mind and open heart. And I think a lot of times we talk about how faith, like doubt, is the opposite of faith, and it's not. You can't have faith unless you have some doubt. And so I have really been humbled by that, and I think about that a lot. And the opposite of faith is actually, my really good friend Allison Dayton, we were just talking about this, and she speaks about this really beautifully. And she was saying, the opposite of faith really is certainty. And the more certain that we get in what we think, we're not allowing again for that faith and for the mysteries of God and to work in our lives. And so I appreciate a God who has shown me all the things that I don't know and has introduced me to different ways of expressing belief and coming to knowledge, because it has really expanded the love that I can feel. And I think it makes me better able to serve God.
Yes, no, I agree. That's amazing. And I love meeting people of other faiths, other faith traditions, because God loves all of his children. And, that's part of this podcast, is I want to be able to reach out to people of other faith, other faiths, to be like, where did you see the hand of God or whatever higher power you believe in your life?
I just think there is a need for connection for those who are trying to speak to God and are trying to serve God. The fact that we will other each other is so counterintuitive to what God has asked us to do. And so anytime we can do that, it has just enriched my life. It's just taught me a lot.
Yeah, it's like, you believe in God? Me too. That's awesome. Yeah. So thank you so much, Lisa. I just so appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you for having me and asking me about things that matter. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much to my beautiful guest, Lisa. Lisa, it's just been so great to chat with you today. I feel like we're friends. So
yeah.
I hope you have a fantastic day.
You too.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you have an experience where you have seen the hand of God or your higher power in your life, I want to hear about it. Please send an email to Sheila@beyondcoincidence.com. Have a great day.